in during this time. And the relationship with her mom transitioned drastically. And, you know, when you're going through any kind of illness, having support is such a major part of the healing. And I wanted to, you know, have her share, you know, how did she deal with that? How did the tools, what tools for surviving when the rug's pulled out and you've got to stay focused because this is your life.
Well, you're so deep, Louise, because my first question is, what you all know what my first question is. You write in here that orange is a body normalizer. The color orange is a body normalizer, and orange brings vitality and energy and enthusiasm. And then you write, this is what shocked me because orange is my favorite color. And it says, if you don't like orange, I can't imagine anyone who doesn't like orange, but you say there are.
Yes.
If you don't like orange, learn to like it by wearing orange underwear, or orange fruits, carrots, sweet potatoes, pumpkin, orange, tangerines, butternut, squash, cantaloupes. You know what? And I didn't realize how many foods are orange.
Yeah, there's a lot of orange foods.
That's a great point.
For people who are wondering, maybe, Larice, you should tell them what book I'm reading from. You know, it's not a cookbook.
Yeah, please definitely hold the book up.
Yeah. Larice, you want to?
It's Strength of the Spirit, one woman's journey through 10 years of cancer.
One woman's journey towards health and enlightenment through a 10-year battle with cancer.
Yeah. You had the 10-year battle with cancer.
Yes, it was me.
Yeah.
Yes.
How old were you?
23 when I was diagnosed with less than 6 months to live.
You know, it's hard to grasp, but so how did you grasp it? That at the age of 20, when you know, I think maybe not until we get much older that we sort of like our sense of mortality really starts to dawn on us because we think we're going to live forever. You know, so here at a young age, suddenly some doctor's telling you.
This does bring up mortality issues, yeah, because first of all, you don't even think of that. You don't die. Nothing happens to you. Nothing bad happens to you. It happens to the other person. And so when it does happen, and it doesn't matter what age you're at, there is a sense of shock. They even notice this in small children. Even though the children are not aware of what's going on, they're aware of their parents' shock.
Yes.
And since they pick up the energy or the feelings from their parents, they pick that up too.
Oh, wait a minute. Stay there, stay there. What you're saying is that if a child, like, I mean, there's that, to me, that, you know, you're a parent, I'm a parent, you know, I think I could speak for both of us, is that there would be nothing absolutely worse than, you know, what people suffer when they lose a child. And I can't imagine, and I don't want to imagine, sitting in a doctor's office and a doctor saying that one of your children has cancer.
Right.
But you're saying that when that happens, children aren't really aware of it. It's the parents' energy.
Absolutely. They're not completely aware of what's going on. Children react and respond according to the parents' energy. So if the parents all of a sudden going, you know, like this, and the child immediately knows when there's trauma going on. That's why, for instance, when a divorce happens between parents, children are so affected and they act out because they feel the stress and tension of the parents.
They're a barometer.
You've known each other for years now.
Yes.
Yes.
Did you know each other when she was going through cancer, Larry?
The second time.
When I moved here to Reno, she actually had a coupon in the paper for a discount on a massage. And I was going through chemotherapy and I was wearing a wig and I showed up at her office with my coupon in hand and got a massage, and we hit it off immediately from that point, and we've been friends ever since.
So you've been through the second bout.
Yes.
Because you had two bouts. The first was when you were in your 20s, and the third was in the later 20s?
I guess it actually began in the later 20s, yeah.
Now, when Larice, I'm going to let Larice take over for a few moments on this, because she's the one that sort of like arranged all this. And when I said, well, who's our guest? She said, oh, this fascinating woman who wrote this book. She had cancer. She's been cured of cancer. And I said, well, how did she do it? And she said, through various means. And you describe these means in this book.
Yes, I do.
And you know what? I will tell you, because I read your book, it's not hocus pocus.
No,
it really isn't.
not.
I mean, you know, I was probably into 5 pages when I thought, this isn't one of those little quickie self-publishing, look at me, I want to be famous, overcome some. This is viable.
Yeah, every chapter is so packed with ideas and opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Because what I did is I just marched forward. Once I got out of that numb stage, there was this energy, this driving force that made me just kept pushing and going forward and learning as much as I could. And that's why this has so much information. One of the things I did when I researched, you're supposed to research your competition. So I was reading other books of people who had gone through cancer experiences, and I was reading the books, and it's not to discount their stories, but they really just talked really kind of on the fluff or the surface. And I thought, well, how are people supposed to learn from this? How are they supposed to really know? And you have to really talk about what's going on, whether it's relationship issues or health issues, because everything is happening. Life is still going on. You're still interacting with people. And I wanted people to actually experience a healing and feel inspired and better when they read the book. We actually, a number of people came together to make this book happen, as far as the editors, the book cover design, everything. And afterwards, I had the people that lived locally, they came to my house, I fixed dinner for everybody, and we did a blessing over the book. I have had calls and letters from people saying, I picked up your book, I read it, I don't know what happened, but I experienced a healing from reading your story. One man said, I was going to kill myself, and I read your book, and I'm not going to kill myself now.
Well, I read the one chapter when you first got cancer, where your mom was just so absolutely there for you.
Absolutely, 100%.
And how she was researching all the information for you, and you would kind of get these reports. Because that's often what I've discovered with people that have cancers, that they all have to kind of like rebuild the wheel. The information is just not available because there are different regulating agencies that don't necessarily support all opportunities that sometimes you need to seek, because if you're looking to save your life, you're willing to look at whatever might help you do that. And so what I saw, even in that one little chapter that I read, there was several ideas. There was, you know, you not only shared your emotion of how traumatic some of the experiences were when you did your cleanses, and you shared how
Vividly.
but because you were so honest with that vividness, that you were willing, you displayed all the vulnerability of that healing crisis, because there is a healing crisis, and sometimes when we get into healing, we don't realize that sometimes you feel worse before you get better, and you just expose that and gave remedies, because so many self-help books describe the problem but don't give remedies.
Or I think the nuances, that's what I liked about this book, is that whether you were talking about the physical healing that you went through, such as traditional medicine and chemotherapy and surgery, or you were talking about what we may refer to as holistic. I don't like the word New Age, because all the stuff that people are referring to as New Age has been here since the beginning of time.
It's old age.
So it doesn't make sense to me. But when you were going through Reiki and massage and all of this, you describe the nuances, and you don't present this as a panacea. You present it as a process. You know, when you went through your cleansings and your diets and all of this, that's what attracted me to it. This, you know, here we went. You can almost feel like when you're reading it, it's on this day-to-day basis. You're watching you go on a day-to-day basis, rather than, I was diagnosed with cancer, I was depressed, I cried, I went to a massage therapist, I had chemotherapy, I ate asparagus, I'm cured.
I didn't want to write that.
Right.
That's what most people have written, because they're afraid of offending somebody.
Because I would tell you, one of the things, the chapters, the segment that affected me the most was the day you were released from the hospital on Christmas Eve. And you were so excited about leaving, but you were so nervous that if there was one thing wrong with you, they wouldn't let you go. And so you describe in here how you hid everything from the doctors and nurses, and yet you were so sick.
I was so very sick, and I was just so afraid they wouldn't let me out of the hospital. And I did. I had diarrhea so bad, and I was afraid to tell them I even had diarrhea, because I thought they would keep me, and I didn't want to stay in the hospital. But once I finally told somebody, they were okay with it, and I still was released, but there was still the fear.
The fear. And I think that's the big thing. Like, you're talking about the healing and that process, and sometimes feeling worse while you're in that healing process from cancer or any disease. But the big thing is that fear, that psychological fear that has to register and block out that spiritual healing and that physical, you know, reverberating, you know.
Through the whole thing, you have to address fear. You have to face it. You have to walk through it. When you don't walk through the fear, it gets bigger. And the bigger it gets, the harder it is to walk through it. And when you do walk through it, it changes you. It changes you forever.
What was the most fearful moment out of the whole 10-year battle?
Oh my gosh. There were many fearful moments. The idea of losing my hair was a very fearful time.
Yeah, you described it that day in the shower.
Yes.
When you were going to work.
With the handfuls of hair coming out. Well, the thing was, my hair had always been my identity. I was never a very confident person whatsoever. So the thought of losing my hair was very fearful. The thought also of signing papers before I went in for the transplant that I would more than likely be sterile and unable to have children. That was a very scary time because I didn't want to give up the idea of possibly having a child. So there are many stages where I had to face fear. And when you get consumed in that fear, then all of a sudden you're fearful about everything. Oh my gosh, what if I get in a car wreck on the way to the hospital? Or what if my husband gets in a wreck? You start just worrying about everything. And you have to get out of being consumed by the fear. And sometimes it's like, okay, Beth, get a grip, come on. Just take one step forward. What does that look like today to take one step forward? And maybe it is just trying to figure out what to eat and what can stay down. Or maybe it's finding something that gives you a mental diversion that helps other people. I was doing some volunteer work for CAP, which was the Child Assault Prevention Program, to keep my mind off of it and to go in. We would put these skits on for children and we would go into these schools and to see these little children, it completely took me out of my chaos and madness. And it allowed my heart to open up so that the fear was no longer there. And that's important, to give ourselves some sort of healthy diversion.
Yes.
So once again, we don't get consumed in that because there's so many things that can help us to release the fear. Yeah.
What I'm curious about, because doing healing work and supporting it and having my own places of choice of manifestation in my life, I realize how important the support system is. Sometimes there's a poignant moment before you manifest. But once you have manifested disease, it's the fear, all these things are such an element of what your outcome is going to be. And you had people support you, but you also had people leave your life several times. You had a marriage end, a relationship end, your mother's relationship changed. How did you deal with that? What helped you?
In dealing with relationships, everyone is experiencing the cancer on some levels, and it does affect and alter everyone. And what I had to come to grips with, and it is the absolute truth, no matter what occurs, no matter what action somebody may take towards you, it is not about you. It is about whatever's going on with them. And it's not the sum total of who that person is. And if you realize that and try not to take it personal, and yes, sometimes it can hurt. My mother and I definitely went at cross odds, and she was acting out of fear and I was acting out of fear. But we were also able to move past that years later.
But how? Because you know, when Louise is talking and you're talking about this, I think of when someone has cancer, like you did, and you would think that a parent, like your mother did, to reach out and to embrace, and they have to be the strong one for you, that's their child, but they also have to deal with their own fears of losing a child. And all those, that produces all of this energy, and at times we're only human and we can't take it anymore and we want to run and we get angry, and it's like, then we get guilt, you know, my daughter may die and here I am, you know, it's just a whole combustion of energy going all over the place. Is there a time when you and your mom reached this combustible level to say, whoa, wait a minute, we're just not being healthy here for either each other or for ourselves?
Absolutely. When I met my ex-husband and I told her that I was moving to Reno, and she had been this mother bear that had protected me and nurtured me and fed me and tried to bring me back to health, she went into mother bear attack.
That's a good term. Mother bear attack.
To protect her young. I mean, that's how she viewed it. And at the same time, I was like, I'm not going to be denied love or this relationship or marriage, and this is what I'm going to do. And we exploded. You know, we butted heads, and we literally went separate directions without speaking to each other for several years.
What? Oh.
And then what happened is I went in and began having some extensive body work done called Heller work, which is very similar to Rolfing, because I was wanting to remove memories from my body tissue. And it was in that process that I actually had a release. It was actually the day that I was told that I should consider a bone marrow transplant. I was actually going to see my Heller worker, which was perfect because I had all these tears welling up inside me, and I just laid on her table and cried the whole time. But while this was going on, I had a release, and it was like, it really doesn't matter what my mother did or what I did. Somehow I want my mother back in my life at this time. And so I arranged, and my sister arranged to somehow bring that back together. And what happened, it just vanished because I had given myself permission to release the block. And that was something, I guess, in some ways more simply because I was just ready and I let it drop. But other times it does take years of therapy doing things like EMDR, which is a type of rapid eye movement to help release those blocks, or body work, or consciously every day going, okay, I don't want to go there of being hateful or judgmental.
And yet your mom just wanted to protect her daughter, you know, but on the other hand, the daughter had to heal in her own path.
Absolutely. And when I didn't fall into that pattern of how she wanted to protect me, then it came out as a rage, as a panic. And that's where the falling apart came. But at the same time, that was a lesson learned because she needed to learn to be on her own during that time and help another one of her children that went into a crisis shortly afterwards, and I needed to learn to stand on my own too.
And she's okay now?
Yes, she is.
And you're okay.
And I'm okay now too.
Okay, now talk to Larice about the diet, because you're going to talk about fruit, and there's a piece of fruit sitting here, and I'm hungry. So you talk to Larice about diet, and I'll listen, okay?
All right. The one thing actually important about eating fruit, it's best to eat fruit on an empty stomach.
Well, that's true.
Yes,
I have an empty stomach.
Yes. Good, thank you very much, because it does digest in the small intestine, and it cannot get there if there's food in the stomach, and it just kind of ferments and creates gas and wonderful things like that. So, but diet is very important, and in the beginning I did a lot of raw food. My diet was probably about 80% raw food and raw juices, and everything was about maximizing healing within the body and not putting anything in the body that would require it to work hard.
Yeah. The other thing, I mean, I'm going to jump to one of my personal experiences that I had with you, Beth, when you were in Stanford. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I came to visit, and this was the first time that I had ever been exposed to the idea of using angels within. So here she's receiving what we would call traditional medicine, and yet you integrated, let's say, a spiritual aspect, because angels are from spirit, into. I remember you describing while I was visiting, I had to put on sterile clothing and everything because she was in a sterile room,
and I think it was
isolation room for several months, if I remember.
No,
just
weeks.
A few weeks.
Yes.
Okay, but so it was as a visitor, it was this huge process to go in and then to realize, you know, that you hadn't touched the outer world, that you were growing a new skin. That was the other. I mean, your whole body was going through like the butterfly. You were cocooning. This new life and new body. But I remember you described how when you said that they hooked up the IV, I'm not sure if it was chemo or what it was, but you imagined your angels, guardian angels' wings coming down, and that the light of God, this is my interpretation, came through those wings and joined with the IV. So intravenously she was, in a sense, adding the light of God to that IV as it was entering your body.
The angels helped in all the processes, from the total body radiation to the IVs, to even helping me in my hallucinations and in my dream states during that time. I had never had radiation. I had had chemotherapy for 4 years, but I'd never had the total body radiation, and it was actually terrifying to me because what I was being placed in was literally a vertical coffin, and I had this metal wall behind me, and I had these handrails I had to hold on, and a plexiglass door that slid across me that was within inches of my face.
Oh, wow.
And I had a harness hooked to me that was hooked into the ceiling. So if I passed out while this was going on, I would not fall, but I would be suspended from the ceiling with the lung plates covering my lungs, lead plates, as this huge giant machine was sending radiation into my body. And so what I did is I had an angel stand behind me and an angel in front of me, and then an angel was actually the radiation machine, and the machine was its wing, and the radiation came out through the tip of the wing into my body as white light. And a lot of people, there are a lot of severe side effects with radiation, and even though I did have some side effects, it was very minimal, and I never lost my appetite, and they were really impressed on how well I did go through the radiation. But the angels were with me 100% of the time, and they laughed at me a lot about it because I would tell them, you know, my angels are not going to let this work, or my angel said this, and they go, okay, Beth.
Before you went through this, had you been a religious-spiritual person, or religious and/or spiritual? Or was this experience of cancer a process of you finding your spirituality?
It was definitely finding my spirituality. I was raised in the Episcopal Church, so I did grow up with religion, and I always felt this spirituality in me, but I didn't really have a name for it. I couldn't really describe it. I couldn't put words to it, and it was this constant struggle. Like most of us were born into homes where our parents are doing the best they can, but there's a sense of not understanding, feeling like we were born on the wrong planet type thing, and that's how I felt within my home too. And so I was always struggling, trying to find that spirituality, even though I couldn't find a name for it. So yes, the cancer experience helped me find myself, which was about finding my spirituality, because in some ways there's like 3 cells within this compact unit of the earth suit. You know, but we have to get all the wiring straightened out, because you've got the ego arguing with the higher self, and then you have like the guardian angel inside you, and trying to get everyone to kind of agree on things is really difficult. And that's why we have this inner struggle, this push-pull. What does my heart want to do, and what is supposedly duty on what other people tell us to do? So yeah, it really helped me sort out and straighten out my circuitry. Yeah.
Let's go back to food. I want to know if I'm
You're
a noisy
so
eater on
hungry.
camera. I'm so hungry, but I'm a big passionate person on this, so I'm not going to let it go. You do write in your book that you gave up meat. I mean, I'm a vegetarian.
Yes.
You know, you gave up meat.
That's true.
Why did you feel it necessary to give up meat in your healing process?
The people that worked with me in the beginning nutritional program explained to me that meat was considered that of a dead food, and that the body had to work very, very hard to digest it and to break it down. And they just asked me to go off meat for 6 months, and then I could choose otherwise. They said, if you've absolutely got to have meat, to soak the meat in salt water for an hour to pull out all the blood and urine from the meat, which held like the hormone shots and the chemicals and things like that. And so I basically became a vegetarian at that time, and my body felt better. It literally felt better. I wasn't so drained. I didn't realize that for years I had just been drained and fatigued, but it was considered normal, and most people walk around going, this is normal, when it's not, when you can have tenfold the amount of energy if you just make a few adjustments in diet.
I remember in junior high reading that book by Sinclair called The Jungle, you know, about the Chicago slaughterhouses, and that was enough for me. That was it. Boom. That just
Yes. A lot of good information can be read through some of John Robbins' books. Diet for a New America is a wonderful book, because he was the heir to the Baskin-Robbins fortune, and he exposes some things both in the meat industry and the dairy industry. So that's a good resource. Yeah.
And your experience led you, and you teach classes.
I teach classes on helping people understand themselves better, both dietary-wise, emotionally and spiritually wise. I teach people how to actually go in and scan their own body to find out where things aren't working well for them and to address it.
So you are what I know is called a medical intuitive.
Intuitive, yes.
And so that means that you could look psychically at my body and possibly see different things that are imbalances and inform me of these. I get to make my choices.
Right,
but you can educate me on what you see on an energetic level, what may not have manifested yet, but is on a causal plane. It's in choice. And so there's ways that we can beat, not have to go to the doctor.
Right. What a lot of people don't realize, most people just treat the physical body, but the thing is what keeps the physical body alive is the spirit, and it's referred to as the energy body. And the energy body has energy organs known as chakras. They also call them vortexes. So there's a whole nother world there that people need to look at. That's kind of that higher self side. And those are the things that I scan, because things go on in the spiritual body before it enters the physical body, but you can also see whether or not it's already entered into the physical body state, because it begins in thought form first.
And every culture has a name, a word for that energy force you're talking about. I mean, whether it's Hawaiians, they call it mana, or the Hindus call it prana, or the Chinese call it chi, or the Japanese call it ki, or the Russians call it pranava. It's there in every single culture. If you used to live in Reno, but now you're living in Austin.
That is correct.
And if anybody wants to order this book, it really is incredible. I mean, I'm an avid, reader, and as I said, this is not one of those hocus pocus, I want to get rich and I was sick and now I'm cured and haha, here I am books. This really is about the psychological nuances that you go through, and it's about the physical realities of battling cancer, and it's about, like you have a disclaimer in there, you're not a physician, but it's about how to use the tools and the instruments of nature to heal, whether it's the radiation from chemotherapy, whether it's the spirituality from all of the different spiritual paths, or whether it's the psychological healings that we have to go through. That's what your book talks about. It's how to use nature, how to use those 2 delicious bananas I just ate, And
look at choices, because we have all these choices, and not everything that works for one person is going to work for the other. But what I notice is creativity. It's almost like, use your imagination. What would be a